Elias Crow had learned to measure his life in losses. The land was gone, swallowed by drought and debt. His family rested beneath sun-cracked stones on a lonely hill. All that remained to him was a weathered rifle, a bedroll, and the horse beneath him, a gray mare named Ash who had carried him through winters, gunfights, and grief without complaint. She was his last companion, his last chance to keep moving in a world that no longer wanted him. The desert that evening glowed red and gold, the sky stretched thin and endless as if God himself had grown tired of watching. Elias was riding slow, saving Ash's strength, when he noticed something near a dry arroyo. At first it looked like a bundle of torn cloth caught in the rocks. Then it moved. A soft, broken sound drifted across the still air, a breath struggling not to be its last. He dismounted carefully, hand near his rifle. Lying in the sand was an Apache woman, her dark hair matted with blood, her body twisted in pain. An arrow had torn into her side, the wound already blackening under the sun. Her eyes opened just enough to meet his. There was no fear in them. Only defiance, even as death pressed close. Every lesson Elias had learned on the frontier warned him to leave. Helping her could mean pursuit, revenge, or a bullet in his back before sunrise. He stood there, torn between survival and something quieter but heavier in his chest. Then Ash lowered her head and nudged the woman gently, snorting as if urging him to decide. Elias cursed under his breath. He tore strips from his own shirt and pressed them against the wound, pouring the last of his water over the blood-caked skin. The woman groaned but did not cry out. When he lifted her, she was lighter than he expected, as though the desert had already begun to claim her. He settled her carefully onto Ash's back, tying her in place with shaking hands. The horse shifted but held steady, patient as ever. Elias stepped back and looked at them both, knowing exactly what he was giving up. "Easy, girl," he whispered, rubbing Ash's neck one last time. "Take her somewhere safe." As the horse began to walk toward the distant mountains, Elias followed on foot, the sun sinking fast behind him. He had no horse now, no water, and no clear path ahead. But for the first time in years, his steps felt lighter. He had chosen mercy over fear, and whatever waited for him in the dark, he would face it knowing he had not turned away from a dying soul. Legs, his mouth dry as bone. For a moment he thought the desert had finally taken him, that this was the strange stillness of death. Then he smelled smoke. Not the bitter reek of burning brush, but the clean scent of meat roasting slowly over embers. He forced his eyes open. The canyon walls rose high around him, shielding him from the wind. Nearby, a small fire crackled. The Apache woman sat beside it, her posture upright despite the thick bandages wrapped around her side. Her skin was pale from blood loss, but her eyes were alive, watchful, measuring him. "You should not be breathing," she said calmly. "You walked until your body failed." Elias tried to sit up and failed, a groan tearing from his throat. "Guess I've always been stubborn," he muttered. She handed him a piece of roasted rabbit and a water skin. He ate slowly, every bite pulling him back from the edge. When his strength returned enough to think, he looked at her wound. It was clean now, packed with crushed herbs that smelled sharp and bitter. "My name is Nayeli," she said after a moment. "You saved my life." "I didn't plan on saving anyone," Elias replied. "Just couldn't leave you there." She studied him as if weighing his words. "You gave me your horse. A man does not give away his only means of survival unless his spirit is strong, or broken." "Maybe both," he said. Nayeli looked toward the canyon entrance, where shadows stretched long. "Men were hunting me. They would have killed you for helping me. I figured as much." She nodded once. "In my people's way, a life saved creates a debt written in blood. It must be repaid beyond fairness." Before Elias could answer, the air shifted. Hoofbeats echoed softly against stone. Shapes emerged at the canyon rim, Apache warriors, silent as ghosts, bows already drawn. Elias's muscles tensed, every old fear clawing its way back. Nayeli stood despite her injury and stepped between Elias and the warriors. She raised her hand, and the canyon fell silent. "This man is under my protection," she said, her voice carrying authority that cut through the tension. "He saved me when I was dying. His life now belongs to my honor." The warriors lowered their weapons in unison. One older man stepped forward and inclined his head to her. Only then did Elias understand. This was no ordinary woman. The respect in their eyes, the way they waited on her word, she carried power. When Nayeli turned back to him, her expression softened just slightly. "You have walked into a debt you do not yet understand, Elias Crow," she said. "But know this. You will not face it alone." For the first time since losing everything, Elias felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Safety. Elias did not recognize his own land when he saw it again. Where ash and broken timbers once lay scattered, sturdy beams now stood upright, fitted together with careful skill. Fresh-cut logs formed the walls of a new house, stronger than the one he had lost. Water ran through a narrow channel carved from the nearby hills, feeding the soil as if the land itself had been given a second breath. For a long while, he could only stand there, stunned, unsure if exhaustion had finally driven him into a dream. Nayeli watched him quietly. "The earth remembers those who show mercy," she said. "So do my people." Apache men and women moved across the ranch with purpose, mending fences, tending cattle that had not been there before, working as if the place had always belonged to them as well. Elias felt his chest tighten. He had survived by himself for so long that the sight of others shaping his future felt almost overwhelming. Ash stood near the corral, her coat brushed clean, her eyes bright. When Elias approached, she pressed her muzzle against his shoulder, warm and solid. He rested his forehead against her neck, breathing her in, a rough laugh escaping him before he could stop it. He had believed giving her away meant losing her forever. Instead, she had come back to him stronger, just like the land. That evening, as the sky darkened and the stars came alive, Nayeli led Elias to the fire where her father waited. The chief's presence was heavy and calm, like the mountains themselves. He listened as Nayeli spoke of the desert, the wound, the horse, and the man who chose to walk rather than let her die. "You refused gold when it was offered," the chief said to Elias. "You refused land that could be taken again. Few men understand what cannot be owned." Nayeli stepped forward and placed a carved stone medallion into Elias's hands. The symbols etched into it felt warm, as if they carried their own heartbeat. "From this night on," she said, "you are family to us. No Apache will raise a weapon against you. Your name will be spoken with respect where our fires burn." Elias swallowed hard, words failing him. He had lost his family to violence and time, convinced the world had no place left for him. Now, standing among people who owed him nothing yet gave him everything, he felt something mend inside his chest. Later, as the fire crackled low, Nayeli sat beside him, their shoulders almost touching. "Some gifts cannot be measured," she said softly. "You gave life without asking for reward." Elias looked out across the darkened fields, his fields, alive once more. He understood then that the greatest thing she had offered him was not land, protection, or even belonging. It was a future he thought he no longer deserved. The trouble came quietly, the way real danger always did. Elias sensed it before he saw it, in the way the birds vanished at dawn, in the way ash stamped nervously near the corral, ears flicking toward the eastern ridge. By midday, dust rose on the horizon in a long, deliberate line. Riders. Not Apache. Men with rifles and hard faces crested the hill, their coats marked by sun and blood and the confidence of those who believed the land owed them obedience. At their head rode a man Elias recognized at once. Caldwell. A bounty hunter who collected more than money and never asked who deserved it. Caldwell smiled when he saw Elias standing in front of the rebuilt house. "Heard a ghost was living out here again," he called. And that he'd found himself some powerful friends. Apache warriors appeared silently along the tree line, bows steady, eyes cold. The air tightened, stretched thin as wire. One wrong word would spill blood across land that had only just begun to heal. Caldwell raised a folded paper. "Territory claim," he said. "Signed and stamped. This land's worth something now. And you, well, you're standing on it without permission." Elias felt the old anger stir, sharp and dangerous. He had lost this land once to lies and violence. He would not lose it again. But before he could speak, Nayeli stepped forward. She did not raise her voice. She did not reach for a weapon. She simply stood between worlds. "This land is protected," she said. "By treaty older than your paper. By blood debt you do not understand." Caldwell laughed. "Treaties burn." Nayeli met his eyes. "So do men." The Apache chief emerged from the trees, calm and unyielding. Behind him stood not dozens, but hundreds, warriors, families, witnesses. The message was clear. Any violence here would echo far beyond this valley. Caldwell hesitated. For the first time, doubt cracked his smile. He looked at Elias, then at the people surrounding him, and understood that killing one man would mean facing an entire nation. "Not worth it," he muttered, turning his horse away. The riders followed, their dust settling slowly as they disappeared. That night, Elias sat alone on the porch, the weight of what had almost happened pressing down on him. Nayeli joined him, offering a small smile. "You stood your ground," she said. "So did you," Elias replied. She looked out across the land, moonlight washing over fields that now belonged to more than one story. "The debt between us is changing," she said quietly. "It is no longer about saving a life." Elias understood. Some bonds, once tested by fire, no longer needed words. They were no longer survivor and savior. They were partners in a future neither could have imagined alone.